Let's now get into our conversation. So today, the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, met with leaders of political parties at the commission's headquarters in Abuja. The meeting is to review the conduct of those by-elections or off-cycle elections, I should say, take observations from the political parties, but more importantly, to plan ahead for the by-elections and rerun to fill some seats in the national and state assemblies owing to either court judgments, deaths, or resignation. Now, about 34 constituencies across the country will hold these rerun elections, besides what may come out of cases still under adjudication. For instance, we're expecting to hear from the Supreme Court. INEC chairman further said that he will provide details of all this, but the commission is hoping to hold those elections sometime in February next year, which is less than 3 months from now. So that will be the basis of our conversation as we look at election management and the Electoral Act. So you can clearly see on your screen members of IPAC, leaders of political parties in that particular meeting, which I said is going to be the basis of our conversation. I'm being joined on the program as we talk about election management and the Electoral Act by the Executive Director of YAGA Africa, Mr. Samson Itodo, is joining us via Zoom from California in the US. Mr. Itodo, thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much, and compliments of the season.
Absolutely. And in our Abuja studios, we have Mr. Jide Ojo, a public affairs analyst. Thank you, sir, for coming on the program, as always.
It's a pleasure, Jeffrey. Compliments of the youth.
Compliments, same to you as well. So, Mr. Samson, let me come to you straight up. Sometimes we mix these things. So let's begin with a bit of education here to separate, because when I was reading the statement from INEC, I clearly saw that they tried to explain what it is. But for the benefit of the audience, for those who may be mixing something for the other, let's be clear on what a rerun is, a by-election is, possibly a supplementary election is, before we go to the meat of the conversation.
Well, thank you very much. I have read a statement issued by INEC concerning the by-elections or rerun elections. So when a rerun is ordered, a rerun is a court-ordered election. It's an election that is sanctioned by a court of law. And what it simply says is, hey, INEC has conducted elections. There have been some infractions after careful adjudication of a petition presented to the Electoral Commission and presented to the courts, I beg your pardon. And the courts have discovered that there were some gaps or some issues, and the court orders a rerun in that particular election. And often a rerun might be ordered in a number of polling units or a number of constituencies. And in this particular case, the court has ordered that INEC should go back and rerun elections in those selected constituencies. Now, for by-elections are conducted by INEC. So INEC sanctions by-elections. And a by-election is conducted when there is a vacancy in a particular office that was occupied by someone who, by reason of death, no longer occupies that position, or by resignation. So INEC is required by the Constitution to conduct by-elections to elect another person to replace that person who has either died or resigned from that particular position. And like we are witnesses to the fact that there are some individuals who were successful in the 2023 elections, who have passed on either at the state houses of assembly or at the National Assembly. And that's the reason why we are going to have these elections, like INEC mentioned, in February next year.
Let me come to you, Mr. Ojo. 2 elections are occasioned by either the court order or death, as explained by Mr. Itodo. They said that they have 34 reruns, 1 senatorial, 11 federal constituencies, and 22 state constituencies. They say 3 cases, according to them, INEC will conduct elections in all the constituencies, and 31 in few PUs. INEC says this rerun accounts for, in their words, 2.8% of about over 1,000 litigation. So when I saw them putting those numbers and the statistics, when you look at 2.1 of the over 1,000 litigation, is INEC just reporting data or simply saying, you guys should cut us some slack at least?
Thank you very much, Geoffrey. Compliments of the Yuletide, and congratulations to Channels TV on the winning of the 16th National Media Merit Award yesterday in Lagos.
Thank you for your kind word. Thank you. We appreciate it.
Awesome. And I really do appreciate the management and staff for that yeoman's job. Having said that, the issue is this. As against the grain of public opinion about 2023 general elections, it's in order for INEC to put it out there that there are 1,191 litigations, post-election litigations here. Because, Geoffrey, what we need to understand is that there is pre-election litigations and post-election litigations. The pre-election litigations are usually arising from party nomination process, issues that arose from party primaries and nominations. Those ones are pre-election litigation. So INEC is reporting that out of all of the 1,900 plus elections that it held between February, March, and April, only 1,191 went to court. And out of this 1,191, only 34 had issues. Not even 34 having issues, because like you said, there is one senatorial elections, 11 federal constituency, and then 22 state constituencies where there are issues. And for those who the court has said they should have rerun, it's only in 3 constituencies where they have to rerun the election in the entire constituency. In 31 out of those constituencies, it's just like maybe in some few polling units here and there. And that means, as against the naysayers that says the 2023 general election was the worst in the history of Nigeria, the facts and data and statistics does not support that. Because what the court has done is to review the election and deem that INEC substantially complied with the law in conducting this election. Having said that, that still does not erase in the minds of people who may have witnessed electoral infractions one way or the other. And there is one that is particularly rankling, that raised in mind, which is the issue of the Adamawa reg, which the court spoke about in today's judgment in the Adamawa governorship appeal court judgment, where it said that Barrister Yunusa Hari, the resident electoral commissioner for Adamawa State, has no business, hijacking the functions of the returning officer by making that pronouncement. Those are the kind of characters that give the electoral management body a bad name, because you cannot, it has gone down in history that example will continually be cited as one of the dents, one of the minuses of 2023 general elections. But by and large, let's hope at the end of the day, we can still have an holistic view of whatever happens, because the jury is still out there. Several governorship elections that went to Supreme Court will still have to be decided maybe before the end of the year or latest in January next year. And then we will have a holistic picture of what actually transpired in 2023 general elections.
All right, Mr. Etodo, let me come to you. Apparently, Mr. Ojo has spoken to the facts as presented by INEC. So let's take it back to the elections in Bayelsa, Kogi, and Imo states, vis-a-vis what happened in the general election. Do you think that there were significant lessons learned and improvement? Because there are certain things I want to bring out from what they said and from the Electoral Act that I want us to examine. But quickly, since they listed out what number of litigations as well as the percentage in terms of performance, Let's quickly look at the performance in terms of Bayelsa, Kogi, and Imo.
I think before we look at Bayelsa and Imo, I agree with the data released by INEC. And if you have about 700 and something cases, dismissed, the fundamental question to ask is, were these cases dismissed on the merit? Or we can attribute that to the level of judicial corruption. We're all witnesses to the fact, and it's in the public domain, where the issue about conflicting judgments, the issue about procured judgments, in fact, one of our most celebrated legal icon, Olisa Abakoba, a few days ago, expressed his disappointment with the judiciary. Justice Dettijo, in his valedictory remark, also alluded and expressed heartbreak with the state of the judiciary. So I really want to question the fact that, that figure for dismissed cases, if we take a closer look and look at those cases, we will find that there are some cases that were dismissed because of certain underhand and certain corrupt practices. I think the other point about the cases that were withdrawn, yes, to a large extent, some might have been withdrawn as a result of lack of merit. I totally agree. But I really want us to not divorce the fact that there are other political economy issues or other exogenous issues that may be responsible for the current data that we have. So I don't really think that that is a true reflection of the state of play. But if you look at the lessons, Kogi and Bayelsa, it is expressly clear that if there's one lesson that we have learned from these elections, is the need for attitudinal reform on the part of a political class. And the one statement that the political class have made to Nigerians is that you can have the best of the laws. You can even have an independent electoral commission that is professional in its planning and execution of elections. If politicians don't change their attitude, if they continue to believe that this game is a zero-sum game and it's the do or die affair, they will subvert the process. Because how do you explain a situation where there were pre-filled result sheets in the recent elections that was conducted? That's result sheets, polling unit level result sheets were available, were ready before voters went to the polling units to vote at elections. That, for me, is a big threat, to credible elections. And the nation needs to rise in condemnation of this and ensure that this is not swept under the carpet, because it's gradually, if we're not careful, it will become the norm in the course of the management of elections. The other critical issue, it's about the beavers. Politicians have now come to accept the fact that this device is a game changer. It limits multiple voting. It limits voting by proxy. And what they have now employed is beavers bypass, because they know how powerful this tool is in ensuring integrity of the process. But what you see is this constant attempt to undermine the process. So when we think about reforms and bigger lessons, we need to speak to our political class on the need for them to change their attitude towards elections. We need laws, that limit the excesses of individuals who want to subvert the process. But like it's often said, you cannot legislate attitude. We have to constantly demand, integrity from our politicians and for them to comply by the rules of the game. I think the third biggest lesson is that the Electoral Commission, the independence of INEC should not and cannot be negotiable. We have to protect the independence of INEC, and it's operational independence. The caliber, the competence, the integrity of the people who are appointed into INEC is critical for guaranteeing the success or the credibility of elections moving forward.
Let me come to you, Mr. Ojo. He's raised some very strong issues. I want to toe that line. Now, apparently we're talking about reviewing the Electoral Act already, and he's been able to explain what he thinks about some of the things that are coming out of our courts and the things that happened, especially in places like Kogi, which is why some people are saying in reviewing the Electoral Act, the burden of proof should strongly move to the Electoral Commission. Do you agree?
Well, we need to hurry slowly because I think what Samson said, which is very instructive, is about the attitude of the political class, the Machiavellian principle that they deploy of the end justifying the means and doing everything humanly possible to subvert the process. Even where you have the burden of proof shifting to INEC, this species of political class can still manipulate that process to favor them. We all jubilated, what time last year? It was February 25, 2022, that President Muhammadu Buhari signed the Electoral Act into law. I was one of those who lauded that move because we felt that the law has now given us technological advancements to support the conduct of election. We all applauded it. There were so many reforms in that Electoral Act. But what have we seen in 2023? We have seen the subversion of these technological devices. We have seen how they have been aided and abetted by the courts, dwelling very much on technicalities. And I must say, very quickly, that I do not have evidence of corruption in judiciary. I know in time past there have been judges that have been dismissed or recommended for retirement, compulsory retirement, as a result of them meddling in election dispute resolution. But lawyers will tell you very quickly that what the court rules over is the facts before it. It does not necessarily mean the truth. There's a word of difference between the truth and the fact. The fact is what is before the court. The truth is known to those who committed the offenses. So whether we shift the burden to INEC, now that the political class are populating INEC with their loyalists, we know, and I think Yaga Africa is one of those CSOs that have gone to court to compel the presidency to review the appointments of some of the resident electoral commissioners who are said to be card-carrying members and sympathizers of political parties. I think about 2 of the newly inaugurated resident electoral commissioners were fingered to have partisan interest. Now, just imagine, Jeffrey, if you have a populated, an INEC that is already captured by the political class, and you now have the law saying the burden of proof should shift to INEC, they will filibuster. They will find one creative way or the other that will make the law not to work. Because as soon as, we have timelines for these whole processes. Remember what happened after the Kogi, Bayelsa, and Imo election. Many of the petitioners, or some of the petitioners, let me put it that way, were marching on INEC premises demanding for materials, election materials, to help them put their petitions together, because the petitions have to be filed within 21 days. And where the commission did not make those things available, the thing becomes status bad if you cannot file in your petition at the appropriate time. So a lot of technicalities will still come into play. But it is good to have a dry run, to have a trial of shifting the burden of proof to INEC. Let's see whether it will bring about better credibility and integrity in their electoral process. But I seriously have concern about the character and attitude of the current species of our political elite, who stops at nothing, who does not brook, any whatever. You cannot stand up to get to them. They crush you if they cannot induce you to do their bidding, they will crush you. We've had lives lost in the course of conducting elections. We've had petitions. You saw what happened in the case of Kogi, where in the course of bringing the petition, from what I read, trying to bring the petition from Lokoja to Abuja, the secretary to the petition committee was attacked and petitions were destroyed. So what will you rely on to prove your case? I mean, I'm just citing that instance. Nobody knew who was behind that attack. We saw the residents of Kogi, resident electoral commissioners attacked, and it was only saved by the military. Maybe he will have been a dead man by now if those attackers have succeeded after raising his house. So a lot of threats to democracy is now afloat, and we need to show concern. Electoral reform is just not about legal or administrative reforms. It's attitudinal reform. We must have tolerance. I mean, Professor Claudake of blessed memory said many decades ago in his classic work that we run democracy without Democrats. We must have democracy, and we must have Democrats running democracy for election to work.
All right. Let me come to Mr. Sampson. Now, you've mentioned a few, and Mr. Ojo has also mentioned the fact that, of course, this is a zero-sum game. And is it fair to just assume that some members of the political class will never change? So we'll begin to think of the electorate and how to make sure their votes count and they are well respected at the polls at the end of the day. So you've talked about Beavers bypass, attitudinal change that is a long shot for some of them. And we've also noticed as well that there is, in the Electoral Act, INEC has indemnified itself. So what some of this political class do is that they go cause violence, so that, because INEC say if there's violence, they have a right to cancel the election. So if an opponent is strong in an area, they go there, cause violence, and that result is gone. And then we are seeing another dimension that happened in Kogi pre-field election. Initially, it was more like chase them away, fill it within the boundaries of what is in the Beavers. As far everybody wants to see what's in the Beavers, okay, no problem. And from EC8A, we'll make sure that it's within the limit of those who are registered at that polling unit. So it looks like the more we move, the more these guys are moving, the more the system is trying to adjust to them. So where does this leave all of us to safeguard and protect democracy for the interests of the people, assuming the political class refuses to change?
Well, that's a very complex question. If the political class refuse to change their attitude. And first, there has to be a national consensus about what we want from democracy and the kind of nation that we desire. And the kind of nation that we desire, in my estimation, in my view, and interacting with citizens, is one that upholds and respects the rule of law. Because we can't claim to be a constitutional democracy, and then the principles of constitutionalism do not shape how we administer public affairs. Rule of law is a critical principle of what? Of democracy. So we expect that political leaders, and including citizens, would have respect for the rule of law. And where there is abuse of the rule of law, there have to be accountability mechanisms and institutions that limit the excesses or the expression of deviant behavior on the part of political class. And this is where things like the judiciary plays a critical role. And this is why Nigerians are frustrated and are disappointed with some of the judges and the judgments that have come from our courts. And there is no point romanticizing this conversation. As a law student, over a decade ago, or close to 2 decades ago, we were taught in school that the judiciary is the bastion of hope for the common man. Ask an average Nigerian who is out there on the street whether the judiciary is still the bastion of hope for the common man. No, because of several issues. Again, legal icons, and including justices of the Supreme Court, have expressed their own view, which aligns with, citizens' position. And so when you talk about accountability, the judiciary plays a critical role. But then there are issues relating to judicial independence, appointment of judges, inconsistencies in some of our laws. The second is about law enforcement and your criminal justice system, and to what extent are our security institutions or law enforcement agencies independent to limit and sanction, the abuse of law or sanction impunity. If there is no consequence, for the kinds of impunity that we experience on a daily basis in our country, you would continue to see politicians disregard people, disregard the electorates, and then take actions because they believe that they cannot be held to account. And this is a role that citizens also have to play by being very vocal, by engaging the political process and placing the demands on the political class and our institutions to deliver, because you can't hold politicians to account if you don't have functional institutions. This is why we have to sustain, the advocacy for the independence of institutions. The discourse on the appointments of non-partisan individuals into INEC is situated within the context of building strong institutions that can address some of the gaps, some of the excesses that we see within our electoral process. You also have other agencies of protection within our democratic process. You have, for instance, you have the Human Rights Commission that protects and promotes human rights. You also have institutions like the Nigerian police that have prosecutorial powers when it comes to these issues. So when you think about our political class, there's a role for everyone to play, but the voters and citizens have a role to play. Folding our hands and not speaking about these issues would only extend the doomsday. And I hope that citizens take up the responsibility by asking the right questions and making noise to address this democratic session that we experience.
A very good place to conclude your thoughts. Thank you so much. But let me go quickly to Mr. Jide, just 10 seconds as quickly as possible. I understand we're totally out of time. I wouldn't want you not to have your last say on this. Just 10 seconds if you can, please, sir, so we can go for a break.
So the issue has been well articulated by Samson, but more importantly for me, citizen oversight. We need to oversee our democratic institutions. The political class are the ones that are even generating the bigger problems. We have not talked about the problem that the political class, the gatekeepers, the political party managers create with the kind of messy nomination process that they put up that has led to over 1,000 litigations that mess up the entire process, even for INEC. Look at the last election in Bayelsa. The decision on who is the governorship candidate of APC did not come until about 2 weeks to that election because of litigations arising from nomination. And you could see the amount of money that is also being used for delegates, to induce delegates for nomination forms and all of that. So we also need to beam a satellite on the political party managers.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Jide Ojo, Public Affairs Analyst, joining us from our Abuja studios, as well as Mr. Samson Itodo, Executive Director, Yaga Africa, who joined us from California in the United States. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming on the program. We really appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure.